Mental health is a topic of conversation now more than ever before, but it's still something far from understood at an institutional level. People aged 15 to 24 are more likely to experience mental illness or substance use disorders than any other age group, meaning students are especially vulnerable. In today's episode, we're talking about student mental health. When our struggles have become an entry ticket on an application essay, but require receipts of existence upon actual enrollment, how do we navigate that as students? This is Extra Credit, the series where we talk about student experience beyond the brochure. Life post-braces, but pre-bungalow, saving you all the Google searches and Reddit threading, one video at a time. So there's this trend with admissions essays to ask applicants for a time you faced adversity in the lesson you learned. And this isn't inherently troubling. It can be said it's done to gauge morality, well-roundedness. However, it's become a sort of trauma Olympics for applicants, where students feel required to share traumatic experiences even when not totally comfortable.
Not only this, but a column in the Daily Free Press says,
when a student writes about adversity, there's pressure on that student to overcome. And how can we judge someone on how they overcome pain? Sure, if your adversity is the time you broke your leg in 8th grade, that's something you could have very well healed from and left with a heartwarming story. But if it's years of living with borderline personality disorder, for example, it's not so easy. And frankly, it shouldn't need to be. Sometimes overcoming literally just looks like staying alive till tomorrow. There isn't always an inspiring tagline to mark it as something of the past. And that is perfectly okay. At the time that I was applying, my mental illness was still a half-diagnosed mess. I was in the middle of learning that I had ADHD and comorbid anxiety and depression as a result. And actually, I was so worried that it would lower my chance of getting in because of all of the misconceptions and stigma around ADHD. However, mental illness would be one of the most widely faced adversities of people applying to university. Because like I said earlier, that 15 to 24 age bracket is the most vulnerable. So that's where things don't quite add up. Despite allegedly wanting students who have overcome things, past that point,
it can feel like universities don't care.
AKA those who are not neurotypical. Neurotypical being a person with a typical brain, for definition's sake. And this is made clear in a number of ways. Think of what's required to say, request an extension. You need proof of illness. This works if you have the flu, maybe. It's not quite transferable to a depressive episode or a psychotic break. And what that implies is because mental illness cannot abide by these requirements, it's less legitimate or less deserving of an exception. And sure, you could go into detail and explain yourself to the cows come home. I would not be comfortable doing that at all. I still get anxious talking to profs about school-related things. Even if you have a psychiatrist, let's say, who could prove it, not everyone has the privilege of access to resources. Between 40 and 60% of people go with their needs unmet. University waitlists to see a mental health worker span months to a year even. Interestingly enough, one article expressed how sick notes actually waste a physician's time as well. One prof at Carleton University in 2016 was opposed to the traditional system and implemented their own, assigning 2 assignments with no deadlines, simply to be done before the end of the semester. And what happened? Everybody handed it in on time, minus one student who accepted the penalty. It's very easy to say that the only way we've ever done something is the only way that works. But that's more about an unwillingness to try than a matter of fact. You're intelligent by these standards or no standards. Your brain works this way, or hey, maybe your brain just doesn't work. This may seem extreme, but it's a felt reality by those of us whose brains do work differently. You may argue, then don't go to university, but that proves my point entirely.
Most universities do not currently have in place the proper support,
like flexible deadlines or alternate teaching methods, to see neurodiverse people succeed. And of course, so many of us do. I love my program, and I love school, and I would say I'm succeeding. Yeah, I'm succeeding, but not without doing my very best to adhere to a system that is not very forgiving to people like me. Your differences aren't something you should feel the need to apologize for. Could I suggest that they maybe even make you stronger or smarter than you would be without them? Living with ADHD makes my life harder in many ways, but I also know that I absolutely would not be me without it. Cheesy, again, always. It's crazy to think to myself that coping with social anxiety has actually made me a better communicator. But that's only because we are told again and again that our illnesses make us weak or less valuable. And you know, people will say that these things are to curb laziness. What if they're lying? And that's where I ask you, what if? What if students have been made to feel that it's easier to lie than to ask? That, like anyone, mentally ill or not, we have bad days and can't wake up in the morning and stop being human to start being a student. A student who needs help, who needs time, is a student underperforming. But could it not just be the prior? A student who needs help, maybe even because they're overperforming, but students taking serious hits to their mental and physical health is something so normalized, as in behavior that is unhealthy, like disordered eating or substance use as a coping mechanism, is called normal student behavior, instead of what it really is, which is a harmful, unsustainable lifestyle at best, and warning signs of a brewing mental illness at its worst. But if something is normal, then no need to worry, right? These things become romanticized as a relatable part of student culture. We're all alcoholics, we're all so depressed. Not only is this dangerous, but it undercuts real mental illness. Now we have one group downplaying, possibly not seeking help for their condition, and another group misguidedly engaging in unhealthy behavior, all under the guise of, this is just what being a student is, when really, if quote unquote everyone is feeling this way, that should be more concerning, not less. Normalization is a good example of a bad coping mechanism. It's easier for us to laugh it off than to grapple with academia so often asking us to choose between balance and success. But accommodations do exist. I didn't know this at first, and I get into my own experience with that process in the next episode. You can start by looking into student accommodations at your given university. Beyond that, many profs do reject the same sentiments that we do and are willing to offer you different test times or extensions. Peer support has been huge for me as well. Confiding in my classmates and not being afraid to lean on them. In a professional sense, but in an emotional one too. Which really is to reject the cold, hard competitiveness that is so integral to our current understanding of post-secondary education. Now, imagine if we removed some of that pressure. Embraced flexibility, celebrated individuality, we might all learn something new. From writing your application essay all the way till graduation, honesty will only serve you. Being honest with yourself, I have needs and I deserve wellness. Being honest with your circle, I need help right now. Being honest with expectations. I come with all of me, a student being one of those things, but not the only thing. When school don't gotcha, extra credits always got you. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!